If this is the first time you're hearing about this game, then you're welcome. Hey people, voice talking to you, and today we are looking at the early access release of the Forever Winter. Also, you're gonna have to cut me a little slack today because I am very sick and kind of nasally. This is a multiplayer Grimdark survival horror looter shooter where you are not the guy, and one mistake could cost you your life. If you think you have what it takes to survive the absolute nightmare of these apocalyptic scale battlefields, I'll have a link for you in the description where you can buy the game for yourself. Alongside that is a link to my Twitch channel in case you'd like to join in when we test out new games live on stream. Now, quick disclaimer before we get into it. This game is still in very early access, and the content you see here is likely going to be very different by the time the game fully releases. If you're not comfortable dealing with bugs, then be sure to keep an eye on the updates as the game develops. So, if we aren't playing as these cybernetically engineered super soldiers or gargantuan mech pilots, then who are we? We are a scavenger, known locally as a scav. Literally, we are a civilian bystander in this war between corporate superpowers who survives by stealing from soldiers and looting the dead. As one of the only people insane enough to brave the surface, we seek to build a community of survivors in the secluded innards of the corpse of the megacity Los Angeles. To entice other refugees and scavs to join us there, we provide the one thing everybody needs to survive: water. Water is our most precious resource and our foremost method of improving our base. The more water we have available, the more survivors will join our community, unlocking new vendors and craftsmen, as well as better options for weapons and equipment. Just remember, water is consumed every day, so you'll need to keep replenishing it. If you fail to keep your water levels high, people will begin to leave, and when you eventually run out, you'll lose everything you've collected in your stash. So how do we get all this stuff we need to survive and advance in the guts of a dead megacity? First and foremost, we can loot scrap and other supplies from the surface to bring back and sell or use ourselves. Secondly, and more importantly, we can complete missions for each of the city's 4 factions. These jobs will invariably be more difficult than a simple scav run, but will bring much greater rewards and reputation with the warring powers. There's 4 major factions in this endless war on the city's surface. Europa is a powerful militaristic megacorporation that employs heavily armored infantry, tanks, and attack helicopters, as well as the titanic mechs that dominate the battlefield. Eurasia is a twisted cyberpunk organization that relies on hordes of biomechanical monsters to tear their enemies apart, and at night, their horrors claw through the battlefields to harvest the wounded for their organs. Yoruska is a brutal, cultish military that clings to a mix of old-world faith and unsettling applications of biomechanics and synthetic drugs. The last faction is our own, the Scavs, the regular people banding together under the shadow of colossal war machines in a struggle for day-to-day survival. They'll never win this war, but with our help, some of them might survive just a bit longer. Our reputation with these factions will influence the prices of weapons and supplies they'll sell to us, as well as how much they'll pay for our scrap. Aside from doing jobs for these factions, we can also ingratiate ourselves by selling them intel and weapons we take from their enemies, and by killing soldiers from opposing factions. Of course, that also means they'll take notice when we pick off their own troops as well, so mind the balance. Speaking of balance, you'll want to be smart about which jobs you choose to take. While supporting one faction will boost your rep with them, it'll also increase their control over the city. The more a faction controls a region, the more heavy units and deadly war machines they'll deploy to the battlefield, and they won't hesitate to exterminate you just because you helped them get there. So, you've got your missions, you know what you need. Time to hit the surface. There are a number of different regions to try your luck at, and each will have its own terrain, faction bases, and dangers to handle. We can choose which location we want to drop in at, though some may require us to get in with certain factions to use. Once we reach the battlefield, though, all bets are off. Anything that sees you can and will kill you. Restraint is rule number 1 for surviving the surface. You are not the protagonist. You are not a soldier. And you most certainly are not going to survive a shootout with a 3-story tall death machine that carries a howitzer like a rifle. The best runs are those where you don't have to fire a single bullet, but any run where you come back alive is one worth celebrating. Stealth and timing is the name of the game, especially when going solo. Learning which routes are safe and which will get you killed is the key to making it to the extraction points at the opposite side of the battlefield. Watch the opposing forces from the shadows and learn. How do they move? Where are they going? How many are there and how well armed are they? Bobbing, weaving, and sneaking between patrols on a battlefield streaked with bullets is a terrifying and extremely tense endeavor. Staying alive requires quick thinking and an exceptional level of situational awareness. To come out on top, we have to learn to seize an opening, but also to quickly assess the risk of seizing that opening before it passes. Is it worth potentially being seen to sneak close to a mech and snag a barrel of water? You will never outmatch these forces, so you have to outsmart them. To them, you are nothing more than a rat. So, think like a rat. Wait for opposing forces to wipe each other out and move on before moving in to snatch up what they left behind. Let the big boys fight it out. We're just here for the scraps. Don't be afraid to hunker down and watch or sneak away if things get too hot. There's no shame in staying alive. The level of battlefield awareness and nimble adaptation this game requires from players is intense, but supremely satisfying when you learn to do it right. Taking advantage of the chaos and slinking away with our stolen goodies is peak cockroach behavior, but this isn't about valor. It's about survival. Get what you need, and get the hell out. Think like a rat, survive like a cockroach. If you manage to make out alive with your loot, congrats. As I mentioned, loot can be sold for credits and to improve our standing with the factions. However, we can also get our paws on valuable items like weapons, ammos, medical supplies and consumables, and weapon parts and attachments. It seems like there's going to be a pretty robust system for customizing and modifying our weapons, but for now, all the changes seem to be mostly cosmetic, as the stat changes are only 0.1% changes, so don't go risking your neck for a new stock just yet. If you've been wondering about that big metal rack attached to my back, that is a rig. Scavs use rigs to carry loot and equipment, of course, but rigs can also be modified to improve capacity or include utilities like lights, scanners, and even turrets. Just keep in mind that the more stuff we strap on, the less loot we can carry out. On top of loot, successful runs will also earn us experience. There's a number of characters for us to choose between when planning our next run, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, weapon skills, and stats. Earned experience can be spent to unlock perks in that character's skill tree, and earning a certain amount of XP will allow you to increase that character's prestige, which resets their XP and skills, but increases their base stats. That's most of the base mechanics covered, so let me talk about the game as a whole for a while. I will openly admit that I am a bit biased because I am a huge fan of Grimdark, and this game scratches like every thematic itch I've had for the past 5 years. The world building here is immense, and I love the dark, gritty feel of it all.
For those below.
Oh my god. That's so cool. That said, I also have to admit that by the end of my first 5 hours with the game, I was extremely frustrated. I sort of felt like I was banging my head against a wall trying to face enemies that outmatched me to complete an early quest and get to the rest of the game. I'm gonna tell you flat out, this game is absolutely brutal on the learning curve. You will die, and you will die often, especially at the start. Due to the inherent jank of such an early access game, some of those deaths won't be your fault either. Great to know. What's the... I'm stuck. If you're easily frustrated by hopeless odds, repeated failure, or buggy game mechanics, you might want to wait on this one for now. The Forever Winter is not a game you win, it is a game you survive. With that said, I also found myself coming back to the game an hour later, and after slowing down and taking my time, I found that I'd just still been on that learning curve. And after experimenting with new routes and different tactics, I found myself surviving more often than not, which is a feat in this game. It takes persistence, and this game can be very grindy, and not just in learning the game. Getting supplies and credits is a slow process, and it'll usually take you 2 or 3 runs to complete a single mission, if you're lucky. I did try the multiplayer for a little while, but the matchmaking and communication between players isn't the best at the moment, so coordinating with your allies can be difficult. Having someone to watch your back does make combat encounters significantly more manageable, and I think certain quests will need a crew to take on. But honestly, this felt like a game best played single player, and not just because my teammates kept getting spotted, but because the stealth aspects and the tension of moment-to-moment survival seems more natural that way. Now visually, this game is kind of an amusing mix at the moment. The enemy models are terrifying, and though you might look at a giant mech and think it's super cool, it very quickly becomes your worst nightmare when it's stomping around on the other side of your cover waiting to blast you into paste. But also, the walking animations for our character feel more like sliding across the ground, and the movement animations for enemies are kind of funny looking, if they move at all, which some of them don't. As I said, the jank is strong with this one. You will regularly get stuck on the terrain, as will your enemies. Sometimes you might get shot because you get stuck on a random corner of geometry. Other times it's because the enemy AI gets confused by their route and suddenly turns around for no reason at all. Other times you will fall into the terrain and get stuck, and the lack of an unstuck option will force you to abandon your run. This wouldn't be so bad, but each time you die or have to abandon a run, you lose all your carried equipment and your loot. and since the ability to recover your gear from your corpse doesn't work either, it's all forfeit. Also, the recruit NPC followers you can pay for don't appear in missions, so don't waste your money on them yet. Since we're talking about the bugs, sometimes bullets will be blocked by invisible terrain since your sight doesn't always line up with your barrel's location. Other times you will randomly lose the ability to aim, fire your weapon, and sprint, and I have no clue what triggers this or how to fix it. Lastly, the enemy AI, specifically that of heavy enemies like mechs, will sometimes know your location before spotting you, and will aggressively pursue you until they spot you, despite their awareness being at 0. Please don't just step— What the fuck is this? Leave me alone, man! The devs told us plainly that the game was not nearly finished yet, and this is very early access, so this is all to be expected. I'm just making note of it here so the devs can fix it, and so you're aware of what you're getting into. These devs have been extremely active, so I doubt the game will stay this wonky for long. But if you don't have a high tolerance for that kind of bugginess, then I'd recommend buying the game now and waiting, since it'll be cheaper now and the funds can be used to improve the game, or waiting till it's in a better state before you buy. On the other hand, the sense of scale and overall atmosphere of this game is like nothing else I've seen. Giant megastructures, enormous war machines far too large to ever face, and horrifying sounds off in the distance or close enough to make your skin crawl. This game is terrifying, and seriously, the art team did an incredible job of making the world of Forever Winter as awe-inspiring as it is nightmare-inducing. What the fuck is that? Holy shit. No, thank you. Who is that? Is that one of those giant doll ladies? That's fucking terrifying. And of course, the music. My god, the music. Jason Willie went completely overboard with this game's soundtrack, and at this point, I don't think we could stop him, even if we wanted to. Which we don't, because I have not stopped listening to this game's OST since it was first announced. It's this dark, grungy mix of techno, metal, and industrial that captures the feeling of this game so perfectly. Mechanically, the Forever Winter is in a pretty rough state right now, and you'll need to be willing to take some losses that just genuinely aren't your fault, and look past some pretty rough placeholder visuals if you want to enjoy the game right now. That said, there is absolutely a solid game to enjoy right now. I can definitely see the vision of what they're going for. The core gameplay loop is extremely addictive, with tense gameplay and an impeccably unique world that dares you to hope while punching you in the face with the grim reality of a world that ended long ago. Honestly, I've never seen anything quite like it, and I cannot wait to see what the Forever Winter will grow into. If the devs keep at it like they have been, this is going to be something really special. I can feel it, and I think a lot of you can feel it too. I might have just a bit of a Stockholm Syndrome relationship with this game, but I'm just the voice in your head. So what are your thoughts on the Forever Winter? Is the gameplay loop too repetitive for you, or are you getting that looter itch just watching? Do you love the brutal, grimdark style of the world, or do you feel it's trying too hard to be edgy? I'd love to talk with you about it down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leaving a like helps the channel overcome the algorithm and earns me another day of water. If you're looking for more, subscribing is the best way to support the channel, and keep new reviews coming your way, because I put out new stuff every single week. Thanks so much for listening to me today. You'll be hearing from me again real soon. Leave me some goodies. I'm just a little scav. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna take your dead friend's stuff, and you were gonna leave it behind anyways, so... no problem with that, right?